Hello again, YouTube, and all you GCSE A-level BTEC students out there. I come to you with a bit of an update. All the information based on this is from the Chair of OfQual's briefing to the senior management teams of schools and colleges across the United Kingdom. In fact, it may just be England. I don't know the region. So, um, I'm going to wait for a few people to join me before this is an unscheduled live. So one of the main reasons for following the Tailored Tutors YouTube channel, if you subscribe and hit the bell, you'll get notified about these unscheduled lives where we're going to be giving you as many updates as we can over the weeks and months ahead. That is obviously going to be quite important to you in terms of shaping your future and your GCSE and A-level results. So say hi, let me know what's going on with you. If you've got anything that's particularly concerning you in the realm of GCSEs and A-levels right now, let me know what they are so I can help answer them as best that I possibly can. I'm going to be giving you my opinion on some things. I'm not going to be telling you anything as fact that we don't know to be fact. There's a lot of unknowns. Quite simply, there's a lot of unknowns right now, and I'm not going to try and pretend that I know more than I do. So if you're finding this useful, watching the recording, do give it a thumbs up and a like. It really helps to share the algorithm. We are going to be finger on the pulse in terms of news from now on. So it really does help other students to find it. The last video that I did just completely off the bat got over 8,000 views, which is amazing. And most of that, I think, thanks to you guys who are just hitting that thumbs up button. And if there's anything that a couple of people give us, there's always a couple of thumbs down. So if you can, let us know in the comments, reach out to us by email. If there's something you think that we can do differently, that we're not including people, then let us know and we can reach out and make sure that we change our content in the future. Ibrahim, absolutely, there are a few updates. There's sort of no massive groundbreaking news, but there are it will give you the timeline a little bit more. So I'm just going to wait. We've just got only 12 of us joined right now. I expect that to pick up a little bit, and as soon as that number stabilizes, if you've got any specific questions, and if not, then I want to know from you, what year are you in? Year 12 or year 13? Or you may obviously be in year 9 or year 10 if you're doing your GCSEs. And what are your target grades? And they're my first two questions, and I've got one follow-up question, but let's start with that. So target grades and what year are you in? And then I've got one follow-up question, which I'm going to try my hardest not to forget. It's quite hard when you've got all these different screens and distractions going on. Private students. Okay, so this is a question that I can't answer with any certainty, other than private candidates or independent students are being considered this year. We don't really know what that means. But unlike last year, where basically it was a mad dash to try and find a system that was going to work, and basically private candidates were not included at all. Some of the information I've got today should shed a little bit of light on that, not a lot, but some. And whereas this year we are being told that private candidates are being considered. We don't really know what that means. Okay, so year 13 going for A star, A star, A. Okay, also beta squad, also A star, A star, A. So lots of high aspirations there. That's amazing. We've actually just been looking at TT how we can basically serve students to support more and more students to get the grades that they need. And obviously some students need A star, A for maybe doing medicine or whatever that might be. And some students will need maybe 3Bs to go into a vocational course or to some other, some other program. So we'd like to help as many students as we can. And Tabin is in year 11 doing GCSEs. Okay, so my follow-up question before I get too distracted is, what do you want your grades for? What's your end goal? So it might be in your GCSEs to get good GCSEs, to pursue a certain A-levels, or potentially you've got goals beyond even A-levels. Maybe you do want to be a dentist because that's what the family's done for years, or what is it that you want your grades for? What is the level above? Because usually A-levels are a stepping stone to achieve a more distant goal. Uni, fat boy, saying uni is the main goal. To get into your first choice uni or to get into potentially any uni. Got medicine as a motivator there as well. Having a clear idea of what you are working towards is very important in terms of motivation, especially now when we've got all this chaos going on with the actual exams and how things are going to be graded. If you can set your sights on a goal beyond the A levels, whether that's getting into the university, whether that's getting into a certain course, then that can help basically remove all the chaos and give you a nice, clear thing to aim at. Okay, so I'm seeing things like potentially mini exams, or I clicked on the wrong thing, specifically a hair surgeon, an ear surgeon, maybe that is, or slight interesting. Did you mean ear surgeon or hair surgeon? Where did environmental science? I missed the comment because you're commenting. Okay, we've got loads of people here right now. I'm going to then give you sort of the headlines of the findings, which I'm reading off this screen over here. So if I'm not looking at you, give me apologies. OfQual are going to consult with education stakeholders, basically schools, colleges, potentially some parents and teachers, people who run multiple schools. So like OfQual, who are the governing body who regulate the exams and consistency, are consulting with basically teachers and schools and the education world, separately from government, over the next 2 weeks. Well, they're actually consulting over the next few days. They will get their findings and then they will process those findings. And at the end of February, they will basically produce their report to the government to say this is what we propose as the regulator is going to be done or should be done. The government will then take the findings from OfQual's report in beginning of Feb. They will then mull this over and then make the policy decisions as to what actually happens. More than likely, they will adopt the vast majority, if not all, of the recommendations, because mostly governments are concerned about not being blamed for bad things when they happen. So if they commission an independent report and then do something differently and it doesn't work, they basically take all the blame. Whereas if they follow the guidelines that were given to them and it doesn't work, they can say, we followed the advice. So it's basically a buck passing exercise from the government. This is how most things run at policy level. Any of you, just by the way, I'd highly recommend a little push for listening to Inside Science this week. Just so happens that my sister is the main feature discussing Brexit and science. She's a science policy advocate, I believe is the right term for the Wellcome Trust, head of UK and European science policy there. So heads up, a little shout out to my sister. But all A-level biology students, I'd recommend listening to Inside Science. It gives you some amazing background information because it's super interesting. Okay, so let's just summarize. Step one, I'm giving you more than what I've just said so far, but step one is OfQual consulting with teachers and schools and the education world the next few days. They will then summarize that into a report, which they give to government towards the end of February. The government will then take the report from OfQual and make their decisions. So we basically now know there won't be any firm outcome for how your grades will be awarded until early March at the earliest. But they want to do that as soon as is possible, obviously, to remove this uncertainty and the doubt and the chaos. I've not even been paying any attention to the chat. So everyone up to speed with day one. I can give you some details of what some of the things that they are consulting the education world about. This includes externally set tests. So that would be tests written by your exam board, someone not at the school. Obviously, the problem with the teacher and what the questions are is that the teacher can test or can train the students to do well on those questions. Okay, so externally set tests, we don't know whether they would have to be sat synchronously or asynchronously. Obviously, there's a whole logistical problem. If you write a common test, then students doing it on a Monday in one school and students doing it on a Friday in another school, if the answers are on the internet by Monday night or the questions are on the internet on Monday night, then that's not fair because the students doing the exam on Friday may have been able to cheat. So there's lots of logistical issues around that, but externally set tests are being considered. Again, none of these things have been chosen yet. These are the things in consultation. Controlled assessment. This is something you see much more commonly at GCSE. How they would do that with A-level, I'm not so sure. Potentially the use of a teacher portfolio of evidence to support their suggestion of their prediction of what grade you would get. So maybe in some extenuating circumstances, students had to study from home a lot, they were particularly sick, then maybe they had COVID and had a long time off school, something along those lines, that the teachers can present a portfolio of evidence to support the reason why a student should get a grade other than what the testing said that they should done. And again, the tests are not necessarily guaranteed. We would expect to see more internal assessment as well. Just as a reaction as a teachers, all of us at TT are teachers. We are teacher run and managed. Like from a teacher's perspective, all of us are saying, well, we would just be assessing our students more often and obviously making sure that we have documentatory evidence of this student has been performing well and how students are, so they have a body of evidence to support any ranking system, any CAG grades that they are asked to do in the future. Should you still revise year 2 work? I'd say 100% you will be tested on most, if not all, of the spec. That you like, it's too early in the year for teachers and schools. That brings me on to some further points that they are considering in the consultation. So let me bring this onto the screen so I'm not just looking away. That whatever replaces the current examination system should allow student agency to demonstrate what you know and what you can do. So basically that it should assess you in some way to demonstrate your abilities and your skills, rather than just being, oh, they turned up on class, they put in a lot of effort. There has to be something that reflects ability and skill. Any assessment should measure what students know and can do, and not the circumstances and experiences that you've had to navigate. So again, it should be a measure of skill rather than how they're going to control for that. I have no idea, but that's the aim, is to not let circumstances and experiences of the last 12 months influence that as little as possible. Basically, so far, OfQual have not found a solution to what they call differential lost learning. So some students at home have a study with a computer and internet and dedicated workspace that they can leave. Some students go home, there's no internet, there's no computer, and you've got six children sharing a kitchen table. Like, they're not equal environments, and so far they don't have a system for equalizing that. Grades should not try to be too many things. So it shouldn't try to be like, they should try to keep the grading as clean to the skills and knowledge as possible, notwithstanding taking into account it's a very difficult task, but these are their aims of what they are trying to do. Lost working can be reported but may be separate from off-qual consultation. I don't really know what that means. I think there's an independent consultation going on into managing that problem of calibrating what the lost learning some students have had versus others. Difficult problem. Some sort of quality assurance or standardization internally within the school, and ideally nationally by the exam board. So some kind of standardization process across the country, and it's potential that results or outcomes will be different to previous years. I think that means they're not going to match the grade boundaries to a normal year, and that there may be some grade inflation again this year. Almost certainly there won't be grade deflation, because I think that's highly unlikely, and just think of the uproar that there would be. They are aiming to avoid the following things: unnecessarily distracting students from learning so that you continue to learn for the rest of this academic year. So that takes me back to, was it Project Connection or Projection Connection? Saying, should I still continue to revise? Their aim is for you to continue learning as you would have done otherwise, as close as possible. They want to avoid demotivating students, causing them to lose focus as much as possible. And they want to avoid unnecessary demands on teachers and managers. So any changes that they implement must be feasible and manageable by the school. Why? Well, I mean, I'm sure. Okay, so I basically haven't been paying much attention to the chat. It's been scrolling along in the background there. Any questions regarding the things that I've said there, or follow-ups, more detail? I mean, I can give you the detail that I can. I've got a document in front of me that has everything I can. Thanks for the thumbs up. Any of those, very much appreciated. We are basically contacting all of our teacher connections, our senior management connections, to get the information. I searched for this information online. I couldn't find it. So this came as a senior manager at a school, transcribed this from the meeting and gave it to us so that we could disseminate the information to you. Okay, so Alexandru. Okay, so when you finish this year, will it likely be June or July? I think normally the A-level exams finish earlier than the end of term. You finish your exams before term ends. It might be that to make up for lockdown and close school time, to finish the spec, that you'll stay in until the normal year groups would leave. So whenever your, I guess, year 7s and year 8s would finish term, it might be that, I would think more than likely July than June. My opinion, not based on any certain fact. Obviously, we don't know what's happening with future lockdowns. We're assuming that with the rollout of the vaccine, things will start opening up and returning to normal, especially by the summer months when transmission should be less. We don't know. Okay. How grades will be made, we don't know. So what's happening in the next couple of days is that OfQual, the regulating body, are consulting with the teachers and education parties. They will then give their findings. They will then summarize their report and all that consultation, give that to the government by the end of Feb for the government to make decisions on how things will actually operate, presumably the beginning of March. Okay, what do the mini assessments mean? Will there be external exams? They may well be externally sat. You're unlikely to do it in an examination hall. You're unlikely to do it, everyone in the country at the same time doing the same paper. What the exam boards could do is maybe let's say they write one test for each module of your course, and they write 3 different versions. And they have one that can be done on a Monday, one that can be done on a Wednesday, one that can be done on a Friday. And then if you did it on the Monday and you put your results online or the questions online, it's no use to you because there'll be different questions if you did it on the Wednesday. And that way schools can choose their timetabling as to when they do the test with whom. You're most likely to be doing it in the classroom. It might be externally set. There's problems with doing it internally and there's problems with doing it externally. So they will have to find a balance of what's manageable and fair. Will private candidates have mini mocks or will we have private candidates? We don't know for sure. I would assume that private candidates would have the opportunity to do any externally set tests. Possibly in social isolation, maybe you have to come into the school and do it in a room on your own, socially distanced from everyone else, as to prevent you mixing from the class. I don't know. Sadly, I don't know any more about international A-levels. I know that BTECs, they are having basically the same consultation process as I've described, but separately from the GCSEs and A-levels. So vocational courses are having basically the same process, but dealt with in parallel, in a separate consultation. So, but international A-levels, again, this is purely my opinion, I assume that if you're not in the UK, if you're in a country that, if you're in Australia right now, schools are open, business kind of as usual. If you're at an international school in Australia due to sit the international A-level then, I would suggest that that's probably going to go ahead. I think those papers can be written. I don't really see any reason to prevent that. But if you're in the UK doing an international A level, I assume that you won't be doing the exam. Otherwise, what that will happen is that private schools will just enter all their students into the international A levels and just do it that way. There is a slightly different spec there, though. Will the mini exams be topic tests or actual papers? There's no way of knowing that right now. I would assume they were more likely to be topic based, or certainly module based, which may have multiple topics in it. They will at some point want to test your knowledge on cross-topic linking and your holistic understanding of the subject. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of synoptic assessment, but we really simply don't know. Any idea of how the appeals process may work this year? Not really. I mean, other than depending on how much examination content goes into determining the grade that you are given, I would imagine if there's any subjectivity in that, you have the right to disagree with that subjectivity and therefore should be given the opportunity to do a test, would be my best guess. And our only model for that is last year, where you could do the paper 1, paper 2, paper 3 as per usual for the A levels in October. Very difficult to give a weighting there, Nikita. I would say your teacher, if there's any kind of ranking, if there's any, like, almost certainly your teacher's opinion of what grade they think you would have got will be considered somewhere in that matrix of the spreadsheet which determines your grade. So to some extent, I think definitely some. How much totally depends upon whether they go for externally based tests or whether it's 100% internal, in which case it could be 100%, Nikita, all the way down to a few percent. But at this point, we don't know. If the mini exams happen, will they be in the summer? Almost certainly, yes. Like, if we ask ourselves the question, how soon could they be? Well, if they don't make the decision until early March, those papers have to be written, standardized, quality checked. You've got to finish the spec with all this disruption. I would think almost certainly summer term, which means after May half term. Again, that's my best guess, but I would think almost certainly summer. Zane, you got your GCSEs in November. You passed every subject, but you got a 3 in maths. You think I should appeal? It kind of depends, Zane. Like, what do you want your future? Like, do you want to do an A level that's going to require you to have a maths GCSE higher than level 3? If that's going to impede your, if you've always dreamed about doing something and that's going to get in the way of it, then it's probably a good idea to do so. But if that's not in what you want, then GCSEs maybe it's not important to you. Again, would teachers use coursework as a way to give students a grade? It might form part of their decision making, but I don't think that coursework will form a major part of it, because that's not in line with the way that the current A levels are assessed. You can have your own opinions on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that isn't the current system. And so it will formulate the teacher's opinion of how well you're doing. If you excel on some coursework and you show your teacher that you do have the potential to get that A through doing coursework, then it can potentially improve their prediction of your grade or their assessment of your grade. But I don't imagine coursework will have a huge amount. Have there been any information on universities about accepting students disregarding the allocated grades? That happened last year, and the government actually put a hard ban on it, Ethan. So I would imagine that will not happen this year. The government do not want universities to do that. They're called conditional unconditionals, right? They're conditional. You put them as your firm choice. They guarantee that you are going to that university regardless of what grade. It gives the university certainty, but they do not really want that to be the case. Same with do I think coursework's, Miriam? will be a big part of the GCSE A-levels. It's going to formulate your teacher's opinion of how good you are, which will contribute to your grade in some way. But a big percentage, probably not. As the exams may be topic-based, do you think the exams could contain questions on smaller parts of topics? No. Okay, here's an interesting point, Hamza. If it's external tests set by the exam boards, obviously it's going to be completely in line with the specification. If it's internal assessment, then it's going to be based upon the teacher's interpretation of the specification, which are not that detailed. There is lots of room for interpretation in those spec documents. As you may know, Hamza, and you're in one of my live classes all the time, students ask me questions that their teacher has set them work, which is outside of their spec. It's not on their biology specification, but their teacher obviously thinks that it is because they're teaching it to them. So that's one of the problems with internal assessment, is that you are basically testing on the teacher's version of the spec rather than the specification itself. But no, all the TT courses are built around the specification and the exam board produced documents, and there's not missing detail in there. If your teacher interprets there to be extra detail, that's where the discrepancy could become in the subjectivity between what my interpretation of the spec comes from the past papers and the spec combined. So I use the evidence from the papers to say, when they're examining this specification point, what do they want you to know and what don't they want you to know? Whereas your teacher probably doesn't have the time, the luxury that I do to examine and analyze those exams. So their idea of what the actual spec covers often isn't quite right, in my opinion. Will universities be lenient when it comes to handing places? Yes, maybe. They're going to be told to be flexible for sure. The practical endorsement, Megan, has already been that you don't have to do the practical endorsement for the A-level sciences, that you can watch a demonstration rather than do it yourself, and that would be accepted. So that's, I imagine, won't change. Is there going to be any level of moderation? As I will repeat the list of things that I went through earlier. They are looking to find a way of standardizing. Obviously, externally set tests are going to be the best way of doing that, or the easiest way of doing that. Standardizing, if there's 1,000 schools and each individual teacher at each individual school assesses every class differently, standardizing that, very difficult. Yeah. There must be some element of testing, I would think. Okay. Once I finish the content, should I still do TT revision method? Definitely. TT revision method. Even if it's internal assessment only, which we don't know. Simply, I don't know if it's going to be internal or external assessment. But even if it's internal assessment, what would you do if you were a teacher? Would you sit down from scratch and write all your own questions and thinking about balancing the AO1, AO2, AO3, making sure that you've got the right mix of all these things? Or would you look towards the past papers and maybe tweaking a few questions here and there? Most teachers are human beings. Some of them might seem like robots, but they are all human beings. And human beings are lazy. And it's incredibly difficult to write good, balanced, fair questions. So almost certainly, even if you do internal assessments, they will be thoroughly based on past paper, technique, all those command words: describe, evaluate, explain, give, name, state, calculate. All of those things will still be the core skill that you need. So the past papers, I'm confident that if you are excellent at doing the past papers, you will improve your standing, no matter how it's assessed or graded or qualified. Sadly, we just don't know. We don't know. I imagine the consultation from OfQual will include some of that information, and the government will feed back on that in early March. Sana, basically, they were not graded, simply. They had to do the October exam to get a grade. in some circumstances. Some schools allowed them to be entered into the, if maybe you've done your GCSEs and A levels at a school or college, and they then were retaking. Some schools or colleges would re-enter that student in their rankings, but basically by ranking an independent student, you are pushing some of your students down, which schools were not very motivated to do. Again, just a little nudge to give us a little thumbs up there if you can. I'm just trying to get that count up as much as possible. We've got 80 people here, 21 thumbs up. So I think we can definitely do better than that. Okay, I'm more or less up to date. I'm just catching up to Miriam. Will universities be flexible in giving offers? Yeah, I mean, I think the universities want consistency and certainty as much as they can. They want bums on seats. They want confirmed entries to come to university so that they can get more money in, basically. They're going to go broke. Universities are already in a financially very precarious situation. And if they are undersubscribed, then they are in financial difficulty. So yes, they will be flexible, and they understand what's going on here. The universities are in a pretty tough spot, actually, because they don't really have any control over what's going on. And yeah, it's tough times. Will there be opportunities to retest exams? Most likely. If there's, my opinion is, if there's any subjectivity in there, which I think there probably will be, if the teacher is saying, I think this student should get this grade based upon my observations of how well they've done in class tests and homeworks and continuous assessment, all these kinds of things, then you can legitimately say, well, I think you're wrong, and therefore I want to do a test. Last year, the numbers of students doing the October exams was very small. It was quite manageable from a logistical standpoint. So I can't really see any reason why they won't do that. So yeah, basically that's going to be, we don't know, but more than likely all of your continuous evidence, all of your continuous assessment, all your mocks, everything is going to basically be put into a big melting pot, and then possibly with some externally set tests that are done in the summer or some internally set tests that are done in the summer, and then it will be a mixture of all of those things that the teachers are actually calling for it not to be called a teacher assessed grade, because otherwise they effectively become directly responsible for your grade, and then parents and students will say, you are responsible for me not going to university, and that's above a teacher's pay grade. That's not what teachers signed up for the job to do. That's putting a lot of weight of responsibility on them that they didn't sign up for. Like, they can give their opinion. Their job is to get the information in your head, not to be an accurate predictor of how good you're going to be. They are different things. Okay. We've seen hundreds of students go from DAAS to an A at A level. I think we've seen D to A star. I don't think we've had an E to A star. I think we've done D to A star and E to A at Taylor Tutors. We've seen multiple occurrences of that. Obviously, there's some hard work and dedication and using the right resources and studying in the right way, but in 12 months from AS to A level, that is totally possible. Do we think universities will drop their offers? I would say if you've got your offer and it's confirmed at this point, then no, but they are going to be flexible. If a lot of students, more than likely, Bilal, we will see grade inflation this year compared to what your normal grade would have been at a population level. We will see grade inflation. So more students will be getting their better grades than less. So I think that is more than likely. It's certainly not going to be grade deflation. They tried to do it last year with no grade inflation, applying the standard, or the models, the distribution of grades as they would be in a normal year, and look what happened. And they ended up going with the teacher assessed grade. So I don't think that there will be grade deflation in any way. There will be some kind of grade inflation. They will aim at somewhere between the normal and last year's 10% is what they'll aim for. They might just say it's not worth it. Let students get better grades. We'll give them 15% grade inflation and we'll have fewer complaints. That might be one of their strategies. On the document that the type up that I've seen, the notes from that meeting is that results outcomes will look different from previous years. I think my interpretation of that means that they are not going to try and match the grade distribution of a normal year or even necessarily last year. It's an interesting question, Ina. If your teacher assessment grades are bad and your mini exams are good, it will be a mixture of two, and in some circumstances, they will take your best one. I would assume that's how these things kind of normally work. If you get a remark on a paper, in fact, that's not true, actually. I think if you get a remark, then you can go down. I think it used to be in the old spec that if you had a remark, you'd take the best grade. I think now, actually, if it's remarked and you get lower grade or lower marks, then you go down, which is why we advise at TT only get a remark if you're close to the top end of the bracket. If you just, some private schools will just ask for all their papers to be remarked. But you get students going down grades when you get doing that as well. It's not a very sensible strategy. Well, I wonder this. I'm going to put this question to the group. What's the point of doing online lessons if your GCSEs are cancelled? Well, you are going to get tested on that information at some point. I'm very, very, very confident that there will be assessment on most, if not all, of the spec. So if you don't do any studying, then you are going to, that would be reflected in your grade. Yes, I mean, certainly I would say there's no harm in getting in touch with them. Probably not maybe the sooner the better, but before it becomes, if you can do it now, it's going to have fewer people corresponding with them than after the A-level results day, all that kind of stuff. So I would say get in touch. More than likely, I don't know. My knowledge about that, I'm not the expert in actually the UCAS process in TT, so I don't have too much to contribute to that, I'm afraid. Okay, if based on what happened last year, if you resit in October, you would have to take a gap year to go to university in September 2022. This is true, Emily. Most tutors can't provide a grade because they are not part of an exam centre. So when that ranking took place, that was all through the examination centres. Mohammed, what you might be able to do is basically create a portfolio of every past paper that you're doing and the marks that you got, and you can maybe submit that as a body of evidence. You can maybe get in touch with your exam center to see. That's my advice right now, would be to get in touch with the place that you would have been doing the exams and see, just get in touch with the person that's going to coordinate what's happening with you. Right now, they don't know because this consultation hasn't happened yet. So they literally won't have answers for you. But if you know who to speak to, so that if they get externally set tests, that you can be there for that. Yeah, do I think students who receive predicted grades will get better grades? Teachers' predictions are always generous. They are always, again, at cohort levels. You might get, okay, there's bound to be exceptions. You know, a teacher says, I think you're going to get a B and you end up getting an A. But the vast majority of time, we saw it last year. They asked teachers to give them their stone cold, honest opinion of what grade do you think the student would have got. And those grades were 10% better on average than what you would have seen through exams. So we know that teachers overestimate exam performance. In science-wise, they're a higher foundation tier. Because they're mandatory at GCSE, some basically, that's a good question. Why are there? It's to some of the, if you only sat a middle paper if you took an average, then it wouldn't stretch the top students to transition into A level. It wouldn't be the foundation to start A level well enough. And if you only sat the higher tier paper, then some students, obviously every student in the country is doing that. Some students find their literacy and numeracy isn't that strong, and therefore doing a higher tier paper, someone who has strong difficulties with numbers, maybe they're dyspraxic, might not be achievable. So it just allows students to ideally sit a paper that's most suited to their level in that subject. Online mocks, will they count towards the final grade? Probably not a huge amount, because you can't control cheating, basically, I would guess, but I don't know. Online testing is bound to come at some point in the future, but I mean, we're not looking at that in the next 2 to 3 years minimum. If you're a research student, well, okay, interesting question, Crypto God. That is the same as doing a retake, resitting the exam the next year. That grade that was given to you last year is an A-level grade, assuming we're talking about A-levels. That is yours. No one can take that away from you. If you repeat the exam in this year and you get given a grade that's lower, then you have 2 A-level scores for that subject. So you can say on your CV, I got a B in A-level biology. You might also have a C in A-level biology, but you can put on they can't take that away from you. It doesn't demerit your previous score. Same as if you retake an exam and you do worse, that's fine. It's not great, obviously, but you can still say, I've still got my B. It doesn't mean that you got just because one's more recent than the other doesn't matter. Well, I think the reason for that is that any testing is going to be done in the classroom, and the duration of the exam will be shorter. I'm assuming, again, total guess here, ish an hour for those tests, maybe 45 minutes, rather than the AS papers, which are assessing the entire first year, which by their very nature, they've got more to include. They're longer, and they're designed to be sat in an exam hall. So I think they'll just break them up. You might end up doing, normally you do 3 papers, roughly 2 hours each. That's 6 hours of exam time. You might simply end up doing 6 1-hour papers set by the exam board. It's highly possible that effectively it's the same as normal. It's just that instead of doing 3 2-hour papers, you're going to do 6 1-hour papers. I mean, that again is like, that's conjecture, but it might be that similar to what you normally do. Okay, yeah, so basically, OfQual currently don't have a solution to what they call differential lost learning, but they have set the aim of the assessment should measure what students know and can do, and not the circumstances and experiences that they have had to navigate. So they don't have a method for controlling for that, but their intention is to take that into account some way. But I'm going to run through these points one more time, in case someone has joined us. Source of this information is the briefing to senior managers at schools and colleges across the country, delivered by the Chair of OfQual. OfQual are consulting with schools and colleges in the next few days, up to a week or so, to throw around these ideas to see what they think is feasible and what they think is practical, and I'll go through that list in just a second. They are going to then take all that information in from the consultation, and then they're going to take a couple of weeks, probably 2 weeks, to gather all of that together. And at the end of February, they will give a report, or their decisions will go to the government. The government will then read their report and their decisions, and then make a final decision on what should be done. And we believe it is likely that they will follow most, if not all, of the advice from the consultation from OfQual, because they they want it to be based on something that isn't their decision making, basically. They are considering externally set tests, controlled assessment, internal assessment, and the opportunity for teachers to provide a basically portfolio of evidence to show that a student's knowledge and skills reach a certain level. They're all ideas. They want their aims are to let student demonstrate what they can and know, what they can do and what they know. That assessment should measure what students know and can do, but not the circumstances and the experiences that they've had to navigate over this year. But they admit they don't have a solution to the differential loss in different learning. The grades should not try to be too many things. And by that, we mean it shouldn't be a measure of potential of that student. It shouldn't be a measure of how much lost learning that they've had. It should be as close to their knowledge and skill reflection as possible. That some quality assurance or standardization or modernization should be done both internally within the school and college and externally, so that the national trend is consistent and that the results and outcomes are likely to look different to normal years, so that the grade distribution will probably not be the same as a normal year, which basically means there will be some grade inflation of some sort, no doubt. They aim to avoid unnecessarily distracting students from the learning that they intend students to still do. By that, I infer they want you to at least finish most, if not all, of the spec. They want to avoid demotivating students to cause you loss of focus or momentum, and not to make undue demands on teachers and managers. Therefore, that any changes that are suggested should be feasible and manageable for the schools and teachers to actually implement. Good question there. Any externally set tests will be basically compulsory. Obviously, there may be exceptions for if you are, like in any normal year, there are a small number of exceptions. People who are, in a car accident on the way to their exam and they miss the exam, maybe you're in hospital, or maybe a family relative is sick. So the vast majority will be compulsory, but I guess that is my opinion. And please don't spam the chat. If I don't see it and it's been a few minutes, then feel free to post the question again, because I may have missed it, but don't just blanket the chat, because otherwise I'll just kick you out. Obviously, commenting on individuals and individual cases, stacked on top of all the uncertainty in terms of what's happening, we don't know. If your predicted grade is ACC, then obviously your work to do is to improve your grades in those subjects. The things that are in your control are to basically continue your education, to improve your knowledge and skills in the subjects where you're not meeting your target grades. That is still within your control. I know it might not feel like you have any control over the situation, but if this was a normal year, as I said, it's possible you have 6 1-hour tests instead of 3 2-hour tests, but basically everything else is the same. In that case, how you perform in the exam is likely to have a huge impact on your final grade, possibly 100% even. So it is still within your control. I'm going to just do another 5 minutes here. I've already been way longer than I was expecting. I don't know, to be honest, about IGCSEs. If you're still in the UK, then I'd say it's unlikely that IGCSEs will go ahead, but I do not know that. I don't know. A lot of that will depend on how the COVID numbers pan out. Basically, how people react to lockdown, whether people actually adhere to the rules, whether numbers actually start falling. Let's just read this one. You went into a system to redo year 13 and obtain A stars in every exam. If you get a C in the mini exam, and the teachers think you deserve an A star. Okay, so that's where I think that where they're consulting, like where teachers will be able to provide a portfolio of evidence. He's done this and this and this and got A stars in this test, this test, and this test. I see his level of work as being consistent with A star. Then I think there will be some means by which the teachers can effectively overrule or boost any grade that you get from the exam. It's unlikely to go. Teachers are not going to be spiteful and say he's consistently been working at a B all year. He got an A in his mini test, therefore he should only get a B. That's highly unlikely to happen. So I would say the consultation process is in process. I think there will be something to take into account individuals. The main criticism of last year was that it didn't really consider the individual at all. At all. It only looked at the cohort level, at the population level for standardization, which meant that individuals who were anomalies, of which there are not many, but as a percentage, but by absolute number, there are, people were being overlooked and treated unfairly. So in those circumstances, that's where some sort of qualitative input from the school or college to support your evidence is likely to be incorporated. But again, no solid information. Ishmael, great question. Certainly long term, no employer in 2030 is likely to be looking at your CV and be, oh, you did your A levels or GCSEs in 2021, and there was 15% grade inflation this year, and this other candidate did their GCSEs in 2023, and there was no grade inflation that year, and you both got the same grade. Therefore, I think that person's better. Highly unlikely. Everyone will have forgotten about this in that time. Employers don't look at your GCSE results really anyway, so nobody really cares, to be perfectly honest. And I don't want to deflate you on that. Like, the GCSEs and A levels are kind of a stepping stone. Work experience, how good you are as an employee, how well you interview, would have a much greater influence on whether you get the job or don't get the job, rather than whether you did your GCSEs in 2021 or 2022. I'm repeating myself, but obviously a lot of people have joined us. When will they occur? June, summer. We don't know. My best guess after May half term. But you are likely to get internal assessment from your teachers starting from September last year. Let's just do this in the chat. Who has had a mock exam of some sort, mock exam or decent test in your subject this year so far? Let's just appreciate that for just a second. My name is Rich. I'm actually Rich Thompson from Taylor Tutors. Our chemistry teacher is also a Rich. And so he's Rich Warburton, Rich W, or Chemistry Rich if you prefer. Okay, so we can see that basically everybody has done mock. So the mindset that we try and train our students for is that testing is a very effective way of consolidating knowledge, and it's basically active recall. Okay, so no mocks. I'm quite surprised that any of you have had no mocks, but obviously some teachers choose not to do it for whatever reason. I think, generally speaking, successful teachers do more testing than less successful teachers. So what we can learn from this is that you will continue to be tested, and I think that is only going to increase. And if your teacher's not testing you at all, then pick an exam paper and do TT revision method using a paper. If you do one paper a month between now and June, we've got what? January, February, March, April, May, June. We have 6 months. Like, if you do 6 papers and that's all you do, you will be better prepared for whatever grading system takes place. Ideally, I'd like to see my students do more than that per subject, but let's start small. 1 a month. It's pretty manageable. So if your teacher's not giving you tests, take it upon yourself to do tests yourself. It is, we know, the single best predictor for exam performance, obviously this year, not necessarily going to be 100% exam. Does anyone know what the best, I'm going to open question. I'm going to just finish with a couple of questions. What do you think, I'll finish on the hour, so we've got 4 minutes. What's the best single metric for exam performance in a normal year? I mean, obviously, everything I'm giving you in my information on here is basically based upon my opinion and my knowledge of the education sector. It's an interesting question. I would think almost certainly not. Okay, so I'm just going to, now that the delay has gone and I can see the answers to my first question, number of tests, test results, exams, practice questions, exam papers. I definitely set you up for that. Normally, when you ask students what's the best predictor of exam success, they say IQ or intelligence. Not true. The best predictor of exam success is number of past papers sat, number of tests done. But past papers, I mean, there's lots of nuance to it, but basically doing it under test conditions is a big qualifier as well. Okay, you've asked a few times. If you've done all right in previous exams but do much better in the mini exams, basically they'll take your best grade. That's why there's going to be grade inflation, because everyone wants to do as well as they can. No teacher wants you to do any worse than that. So we don't know how that balance. I would think it's mostly going to be based upon some tests with some wiggle room for your teachers to provide evidence to say, actually, he didn't perform very well, he or she didn't perform very well in that test, and therefore we think they should get this grade instead. That's my best synopsis of what I think will happen. There will be either internal or external tests done in June that will give you some sort of grade output, and if you think that grade output is too low and your teacher think that's too low, they will be able to submit a portfolio of evidence to say, actually, they got this B in the test, but they probably should have got an A. And then if you as a student still think, actually, I was going to get an A star, then you can do the exam in October. That's my best guess. 2 minutes. I don't teach chemistry. Other Rich teaches chemistry. Taylor tutors, we do biology, chemistry, maths, A-level, AS and A-level, obviously. TaylorTutors.co.uk if you want to try the courses for free. Again, if you go back and listen to the recording of this, we simply don't know. All of the evidence, all of the assessment that you're doing between now and then could contribute to that portfolio of evidence, which could tweak your grade at the end. That's my best guess. So yeah, everything you do is just going to form this body of evidence of consistently where are you at in terms of, and obviously your level may now increase slightly between now and the exam. You might be getting B's now, you might be getting A's in March, and you might be getting A stars in June. And so that if you've got documentation of your performance all the way along that curve, then that's strong evidence to show that you're improving, and that if you do, then do the test at the end of the year, whatever that may look like, and you get your A, but you're consistently been getting A stars because that you've shown that progress, then maybe you can adjust that grade. Clara, yeah, likely to be some exams in October this year, because if people don't like the grade they get given, then they probably will have the opportunity to do a test, unless they base the grades this year very heavily on testing and there's no subjectivity in it. For medicine, is it better to take foundation year or retake next year? Well, if you'd done that last year and you were going to retake again this year, you're still in the same boat. There is no guarantee that COVID won't be done in 2022. Unlikely, But there's no guarantee. I would say move on if you can. If they are topic-based tests, then you will have some idea. If it's, let's say, Module 1 or Topic 1 in A-level biology, then it could be carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, enzymes, DNA, ATP. Could be any of those. You won't be like, you've got a test on how the semi-conservative nature of DNA replication. It's not going to be that kind of topic, but you might get, it is Module 1 from your course. So chapter 1 in the textbook, or however that may be. So likely you'll have some topic indication. Again, also, I think there's likely to be a synoptic test of some kind. Much easier to assess a student's general all-round knowledge of a subject in a synoptic test rather than topic-based testing. At TT, we suggest that you revise paper by paper, not topic by topic, for that very reason. Topic-based tests are easier. I'm going to give one final shameless plug. There's 100 of you watching, and we now have 61 thumbs ups. So we got 60% of you. I'd quite like to get that, just nudge it up a little bit more. Just because I want the algorithm to chuck this out to as many students as possible. If you found it useful, if you didn't find it useful, obviously I'm only giving you the information we have, which is not a huge amount. I'm just trying to answer everyone's questions as best as I possibly can. If you've got any feedback for me or anything for TT that you would like us to do, please do let us know in the comments below. Reach out to us by email. If you're one of our subscribers and members inside the course, then obviously you can reach out to me directly inside the course, or any of your teachers or tutors directly. It's 12:02 my time. It is 8:02 your time. I will be clocking off now. Hit the channel, hit the subscribe button, and hit that bell, because this was completely unscheduled. Most of our live news updates will be evenings, but unscheduled. I can't say when it's going to happen, because we will wait till we get the news and we've understood it before we basically roll that out. So hit the bell, and then we will do lives as often as we can whenever we've got news. Clary, go back and watch the recording. I've given all the information I can about private candidates. You will be considered, but we don't know what that means. And please stop spamming the chat, otherwise I will have to block you from the channel, and I don't want to do that. Okay. If you have any outstanding questions, burning questions, put them in the comments, and I will check in with them a little bit later on. And we'll try and answer as many of you guys as we possibly can. But as I said, just hit the notification, hit subscribe, hit the bell, and next time I'm here, you can ask me your questions, and yeah, we'll try and answer everyone in person. Bye!